This video is sponsored by Craftsy. This Art Deco-ish tall chest of drawers has definitely seen better days. Clearly, whoever had this had a lot of plants on the top, which I'm sure looked very nice, but as you can see, just completely wrecked this top. Now I'm going to do what I can for this piece, but what makes restoring this top a little bit tricky is that it is very thin veneer over that waterfall edge. On the rest of the piece, the finish is either wearing in strange ways, missing completely, chipped off. But check out these beautiful Bakelite and metal pulls. These aren't brass, they're just painted to look that way, and you can see there's a lot of tarnish. But this piece definitely has potential. The drawers are a little stiff. Most of these drawers have some issues with the drawer bottom itself or the runners, so I'm going to fix those as I go along. And I want to talk to you about a very sweet project I have coming up for these two. I'm not just sleeping in the chair right now, but I put these really backyard window seats up. So clearly I need to do better by these cats. I'm going to be making them a really cool customized windowsill. But for now, back to the task at hand. Let's get this piece cleaned up. Stay tuned. My name is Angie and I refinish furniture. Sometimes I paint and sometimes I don't, but I always do what I can to save old pieces from the trash. Welcome to my workroom. So some of you may have noticed in the last few videos I have been doing more pieces that I said came from a junk company that I used to deal with, but I don't any longer. Before I started my YouTube channel in 2021, I used to have a storefront, and I'll show you a few pictures here of my little store that I used to have. Back then I was doing a lot more furniture. I was able to do 2 or 3 pieces a week easily. But once I started YouTube, everything slowed down. I was only able to do 2 or 3 pieces a month because, filming, editing slows me down. But anyway, recently I moved my huge storage room into 2 smaller storage rooms closer to me, and all the furniture that was at the back, everything got kind of flipped around. So now I'm starting to work on all of these pieces that were lost at the back of the storage room for years. Now, what's actually kind of sad about all that is I got a lot of these pieces either for free or very cheap, but because they've been in storage for almost 5 years, I've probably paid for them 10 times over. Aren't these pulls neat? Now this, like I said, looks like brass. It's not. It's actually some sort of coating that they put on it. It's not a typical plating. I'm just having a look at the drawers as I pull them out to see what's causing the friction and taking off these handles. I'm so excited to work with these, but I was not expecting the Bakelite on these to be so thin. I'll show you in a minute. This drawer I had a hard time getting out, and you'll see why in just a moment. The bottom has sagged quite a bit. The nails have all popped out and they were catching on the support underneath. So having a better look now at these, look how thin this is, and obviously it's see-through, but I have to be very careful cleaning all the old grime and crud off these, that I don't snap it. I can't just go find these at Hobby Lobby or Lee Valley. No pressure. I'm going to start working on the drawers before the main part of the cabinet. I'm just going to tap the nails that were already in place back down, but you can't really trust them. They've popped out once, they're going to pop out again. So I added a couple additional nails. Normally I don't like to have this many nails on a back panel, whoopsies. But this is going to do a good job of holding everything in place. Now, the drawer boxes themselves are in pretty good shape. They're pretty sturdy. There's nothing loose that I can find aside from the bottom panel. But they are a little bit dingy, and when I redo a piece, it doesn't matter how fancy it is or how valuable, and this piece is not particularly valuable. But I like to make sure that the drawers are nice, that they're clean, that there's no splinters or rough wood anywhere, and often this means sanding the drawer boxes inside and out and resealing them. Definitely overkill for some people. For me, it is a standard, and it's just something I've always done and will always do. Used furniture already still has a little bit of a stigma to it, so if I'm flipping a piece and I wouldn't want to put my unmentionables in a drawer, I'm not going to sell it that way. Now this beautiful veneer on the front is in different sections. We've got 2 edges here that are vertical, and then we've got diagonal in the middle. The finish is really brittle, so I'm going to be scraping it off. But you have to be really careful when you have these inlaid veneers like this that intersect at different angles. I kind of do one little section at a time, being very careful at the seams and of course the edges. And once I have the majority of that off, I can go in, I believe this is a 150 grit. And this is just to remove any residual finish. Very, very light sanding here. I'm going to add some pencil marks to go up to my next grit, which will be 180, which is going to refine it further. Again, this is veneer. I don't want to go in with anything too crazy here, because it is very thin. And did the same on the other drawers, and then there were a few spots where the veneer was actually chipped. Tiny little chips, not worth replacing actual veneer. So I'm just putting a tiny bit of walnut wood filler. After the wood filler dries, I'm going to go in with a very light hand sanding of 220 to finish this off. This top looks beefy, but it's not. It's very hollow sounding. It's basically a couple of layers of veneer, and those are glued together like a plywood. The side panels are also the same, a couple layers of veneer, but while the top and drawer faces are walnut, the side panels are a very thin birch veneer, and all of the solid wood trim is also birch. Now sometimes I will scrape a waterfall top if the finish is really bad. In this case, there's so much damage to the top, I'm choosing to strip it, and I'll use a chemical stripper on the sides as well, just to make things a lot faster. Once I have the majority of the old finish and stripper off, I can go in and sand. Now, you have to be so careful on these edges. If you're going to use a power sander, use a foam pad. It's going to help sand that curve without damaging it. Speaking of curved things, I want to create a curved window seat for these guys. I'm basically going to be replacing the very small pine sill that's there with something custom. Now I would like it to be wider, obviously, but I also want to create two areas where the cats can sleep. Basically a larger version of what you see here. As you can see, the windowsill itself is not very sturdy, so we're going to beef that up. I need to take into consideration a few things. First of all, this is going to come out like this. I don't want it to interfere with my printer or anything. And then this section, it needs to come out a bit, but if Andrea decides to come in and sit in the chair, I don't want her clunking her head. So it's going to take a little bit of finessing to get this design right. Now, it's because of sponsors like Craftsy that I'm able to bring these videos to you on a mostly weekly basis. Craftsy is your online community and resource for all things creative, where millions of makers and DIY enthusiasts find inspiration, advance their skills, maybe learn some new ones along the way. Whenever I even think about attempting a project like this custom cat windowsill, I like to go on Craftsy and have a look at any videos that I think might help me in this process. I thought about making the cushion areas for the cat circulars, so I checked out this video on cutting circles with a table saw. And if you remember my cat condo video, I'm not the best at sewing, so I opted to have a browse through some of these to see if I could make my cushions a little bit better than the previous versions. This class, All About Sewing Zippers by Janet Prey, was particularly useful for me and took a little bit of the scariness away from adding a zipper to a pillow, which you guys know I completely avoided in the last one. But Craftsy has a lot more than just sewing videos. They're always creating new classes to keep you coming back for more and stay inspired. And it's so easy to follow their step-by-step demonstrations. So if you're looking to hone some skills, with more than 2,000 classes in over 20 popular categories, you'll never be bored and you'll always be inspired to try something new. Right now, the first 1,000 people to either click the link below in the description box or click the QR code here on the screen will get a full year premium membership to Craftsy for only $1.49. And this is valid for new members only. I'll leave that QR code up just a little bit longer. And again, thank you to Craftsy for helping me bring this video to you. So you can see here how the sponge pad definitely can make sanding this curved edge a lot easier. You can hand sand as well, and in fact I usually do that on the bottom. But this is a situation where I see a lot of beginners take a normal orbital sander and a normal sand pad and go at that edge and go right through the veneer. So if you're trying one of these for the first time, just be really mindful of that. Now I'm only scuff sanding the trim pieces here as well as the edge panels, and the reason for that is I'm going to be painting them. Don't get mad at me, it's going to look amazing, and I'll explain why shortly. I need to try to get these stains out of the top, so I'm using some oxalic acid. You guys have seen me use this many times before. It's a wood bleach. While I am going to be going over the entire top with the oxalic acid, I'm first doing something I very rarely do, and that is only using oxalic acid on the stained parts themselves. Now, the reason I don't do that very often is when you do that, you can very often end up with a lighter area of wood. So instead of a dark ring, you'll have a light ring. But the thing is, light rings are way easier to fix than a dark ring that doesn't come out all the way. And because these were so bad, that's just the route I opted to go. So I'm going to move this closer to the door here, let that dry. And in the meantime, I'm going to pop the rusted machine screws into a rust bath of Evaporust, and then clean up those gorgeous vintage pulls. Now, this white pad is a non-woven pad. It does not scratch. I'm going to be using that on the plastic parts. And on the metal parts, I'm going to be using this 1500 grit Merkur Milan pad. It's still super fine, but it has a little more tooth, and it's going to help me prepare these for treatment. And like I said, these are not brass. This is the easiest way to tell. Brass is not magnetic. So if you have a little extendable magnet like I have here, you can test out your hardware to find out. There's a lot of rust and tarnish on these, so I'm going to be kind of wearing that down with some Barkeeper's Friend and that 1500 grit abrasive pad. On the Bakelite, which is very, very fragile, I'm just using a very gentle cleaner and that softer white non-woven pad. Once they are clean, I'll rinse them, dry them, set them aside while I work on the middle part. I'm going to be using a metallic spray paint on these, so I need them as smooth and flat as possible. Now, a lot of people might not realize you can use something like Odie's oil on plastic. In this case, it's going to give the Bakelite a beautiful luster, add some extra protection, and keep these from drying out and cracking. It will also help repel the oils in someone's hand as they're pulling the drawer open. So now that the oxalic acid has dried fully, I'm coming in with some plain water on a shop towel because oxalic acid needs to be rinsed off really, really well. One of the drawers had a split in the side, and the dovetails are so well joined that I didn't want to take this apart. So I'm doing my best to just shove some glue into that crack. I'm going to manipulate the two pieces of the board with my fingers to try to get them level and then clamp it up to dry. I'm gonna do one more oxalic acid treatment. You can see that those stains are still there just a tiny bit. If I was going to be staining the top, I probably would have skipped this step. The stain would have covered those completely. But because I'm gonna be using just plain Odie's oil, I want to get as much of these out as possible. And by now, the paint on the hardware has dried, so I'm gonna kind of put these back together. I could not be happier with how these turned out. This is very, very similar to how they would have looked brand new. This is after the second oxalic acid treatment and a light sanding. These rings look dark, but they don't once I start putting the Odies on, and you'll see that in a few minutes. Okay, so now the part some of you are going to hate me for. I mentioned I'm going to be painting these side panels as well as all of the trim. Side panels and the trim are birch. A dye stain was used, and it would be very difficult to get all of that old stain out and get it back to a natural color. I could certainly restain it, but if you look here, the side panel is actually a piece of 1/8 inch plywood with a very, very thin layer of birch on the outside. In fact, there's a little section of veneer I have to glue back down. And in this situation, with the gorgeous walnut top and drawer faces, as well as the beautiful pulls, I think the black is just going to really set it off. This is not an exceptional quality piece to begin with, so in this situation I have no problem painting part of it. It's going to modernize it a little bit while allowing the drawer fronts, pulls, and the top to really heavily lean into its roots. Now you might be wondering why I'm not using a primer. Fusion has a built-in primer and is often not necessary unless you're going over a type of wood that tends to leach a lot of tannins, which will bleed through your paint, or if you have to worry about adhesion. I'm not worried about either in this case. And I'm also not worried about that paint getting into the grain because birch is a very, very tightly closed grain. On the top edge and sides of the drawer faces, I'm using a water-based stain in the color walnut. The wood that is sandwiched between the layers of veneer on these drawer faces is not walnut, so it's a very light wood, which is why it needs to be stained. Now this might look like I'm putting stain on the drawer front, but that is the natural color of walnut with a top coat. I'm using the Odie Super Duper Everlasting Oil, which is a tung oil based product. I absolutely love it on raw wood where I'm able to use it. Now when applying to the top, you can see what I was talking about where those rings are popping through just a little bit, but they're very light. I'm going to deal with that in a moment. Once I have buffed off all of the excess Odie's oil, I can go ahead and pop the hardware back on the drawers. Now the way I have the camera set up here, it's the perfect angle to see that light ring, and I'm just adding some graining markers to kind of minimize that. Most people wouldn't even notice it. All in all, we stripped the old finish, did 2 rounds of oxalic acid, 2 layers of Odie's oil, cleaned up the hardware, 3 layers of black paint with beeswax over top, and I'm excited to show you how this looks. You will see the results of my custom kitty windowsill coming up soon. I've already bought the rest of the materials, and clearly it's already kitty approved. As always, thank you so much for watching, enjoy the reveal, and I'll see you next time.